She's wasting away right in front of us." The maid turned and saw the billionaire watching. Grant Wilder hadn't planned to be home that evening. Aspen was already dipping into its quiet twilight when his security car pulled into the long, curved driveway of the estate. He was supposed to be in Denver for dinner with investors, but a last-minute report from his house cameras had unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. Inside the nursery, Nia Brooks leaned quietly against the edge of the baby's cot, still wearing the thin gloves she'd been cleaning with. She hadn't meant to linger, but Elowen Wilder had stood up weakly inside the cot for the first time in days, her tiny hands trembling on the rail. Toys and teddy bears lay scattered on the floor beneath her, untouched, forgotten. Elowen was shrinking. Not in imagination, not in fear, in flesh. Just weeks ago, she had been full, warm, alert. Now her cheeks had hollowed, her ribs faintly visible beneath fragile skin. The doctors called it failure to thrive. They blamed digestion, stress, psychosomatic withdrawal. They blamed everything except what no one wanted to face. Her mother, Seraphine, had once screamed this same warning through the halls of the house that her child was being starved, that something in the feeding was wrong. But Seraphine had a family history they could easily use against her. They said she was unstable, too emotional, overreacting. And now she sat locked away in a psychiatric facility outside Aspen, her warnings buried with her voice. Nia had never met Seraphine, but she felt her absence in the room like a cold shadow. As Nia reached slightly toward Elowen, still gloved, still careful, the baby flinched at the sight of the bottle nearby. Not in hunger, in fear. And in the doorway, unseen until that moment, Grant Wilder stood frozen. For the first time, he was not looking at charts, not listening to doctors, not hiding behind money or authority. He was watching his daughter with his own eyes, and everything he thought he understood about his child began to crack. What had the baby learned to fear before anyone learned to listen? Before we continue, please like, share, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's dive back into the story. The nursery, once a haven of soft lullabies and pastel warmth, had grown unnervingly silent. Nia stood at the edge of the crib, her gloved hands frozen midair as she stared down at the child nestled beneath a pale blue blanket. Elowen's cheeks, once plump and pink, now hung hollow beneath shadowed eyes. Her tiny chest rose and fell too slow, too shallow. And worse, Nia could now count the child's ribs. She shouldn't be able to. Something wasn't right. And the room felt heavy with unspoken warning. The walls of the Wilder estate were thick with denial. Grant moved through the house with a calm certainty, brushing off concern with tight smiles and cold logic. "She's just adjusting," he'd said. "Dr. Pierce calls it a rare digestive inefficiency. Nothing alarming." But Nia had heard that term too many times this week. Efficiency? No. Elowen wasn't inefficient. She was starving. Quietly, painfully, right in front of everyone. Each time Nia prepared a fresh bottle, she watched Elowen latch with weak desperation, her tiny lips trembling with effort. But each feeding ended too quickly. Too little was being consumed. And still, the logbook on the shelf claimed ounces that never passed through the baby's lips. Page after page, it was all there. 4 ounces, 6 ounces, 5.5 ounces. Lies dressed up as nutrition. Nia had taken over recording the actual amounts herself, scribbling faint notes on scrap paper in her apron pocket, away from Seraphine's prying eyes. Seraphine. It was the first time Nia allowed herself to say the name with unease. Grant had once described his wife as sensitive, but this week, sensitive had twisted into something sharper, unpredictable, detached, unstable. The nursery door creaked slightly behind her, but Nia didn't turn around. The air was still, watchful. She reached for the next formula bottle from the warmer and paused. The bottle wasn't the same. Its shape matched, but the cap was off-white, not clear. The measurement markings were in a different font. Subtle, yes, but unmistakable. It wasn't one she had prepped. Nia sniffed the formula, her brow furrowing. It carried a faintly sweet smell, not like the hypoallergenic mix Dr. Pierce had prescribed. She checked the others lined up for the day. Every single one bore small inconsistencies, different bottles, different labels. One even had an expired seal she hadn't noticed earlier. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked the odd bottle under a towel on the counter. She couldn't accuse. Not yet. Not without proof. But someone was switching them, and it was slowly killing Elowen. As Naya looked back at the crib, the baby whimpered faintly, eyes still closed. Her fingers twitched. Her skin had taken on a translucent sheen, fragile, like the petals of a dying bloom. The room, again, fell eerily quiet. Even the mobile above the crib had stopped spinning. Some people notice danger long before others are ready to admit it. If you've ever been the one who saw the truth first, staying with stories like this is how we honor that instinct. Naya took one last look at the strange bottle hidden beneath the towel, then reached for her notepad. She didn't know who was lying, but she was done pretending not to see. She glanced over her shoulder toward the hallway, her breath catching. Footsteps. Someone was coming. She whispered into the stillness. Why was the bottle different every time? The silence didn't answer, but something in the house had already heard her. The Silver Pine Psychiatric Facility sat nestled among snow-capped evergreens like a secret no one wanted to remember. Its sterile halls hummed faintly, lights too bright, silence too loud. Somewhere inside, Seraphine Wilder pressed her trembling palms against the reinforced glass of her room's window, her breath fogging the edges. No one had visited in weeks, but her voice still echoed, if only in the places no one wanted to listen. 2 months earlier. She's starving to death. Seraphine's voice cracked as she lunged across the nurse's station, her wrists restrained before her fingers could grip the chart. Check the logs, check the bottles. They're changing them. Something's wrong. The staff exchanged weary glances, nodding to the on-call psychiatrist. She's in full fixation again. One whispered, she hasn't slept in 4 days. Another said quietly, they didn't argue her facts. They never did. They simply labeled her delusional, citing her grandmother's history of postpartum psychosis and her own bouts of depression after Elowen's birth. Grant had stood behind her that day, stiff in his blazer, face pale with quiet shame. He didn't meet her eyes when he signed the voluntary admission forms. He only whispered, "This is just to help you rest." Seraphine turned toward him, wild-eyed. "You think I'm crazy? Because I care more than you do?" His lips parted, but no words came. And in that silence, something between them broke. They led her down the corridor that day with soft voices and steady hands, but none of them noticed the trembling urgency in her words. Or worse, they noticed and dismissed it. A mother's voice is rarely wrong but often ignored. Back at the Wilder residence, Naya sat hunched in the laundry alcove, earbuds tucked beneath her scarf. The nursery monitor had been hacked days ago, a trick she'd picked up from her cousin back home. But this wasn't about watching Elowen sleep. This was about what the monitor had picked up before. Security backups, Grant thought, were deleted. The crackle of old audio filled her ears. Seraphine's voice. Desperate. Shaky. She drank 2 ounces, not 4. Why does the log say 6? Who's writing this? A pause. The sound of soft footsteps. A door creaked. Why are the bottles different colors now? Where's the original formula? Naya's heart thudded. Another clip. She's crying all night. That's not colic. That's hunger. Listen to her. For God's sake, someone listen. Naya stopped the recording, her fingers trembling. These weren't the ravings of a broken woman. They were the notes of someone watching, documenting, begging to be taken seriously, exactly like Naya was now. Inside Silver Pines, Seraphine sat cross-legged on the window bench, sunlight catching in her tangled hair. They think I'm wrong, she whispered to no one. But I wasn't wrong about the bruises on her back. I wasn't wrong about the rashes after the new bottles. I wasn't wrong when she stopped looking at me. Her voice softened to a murmur. If I'm crazy, why does everything I said keep coming true? The walls didn't answer. But across town, Naya pressed play on another clip. Seraphine's voice crackled through again. Distant but clear. Please, someone before it's too late. Some truths are only heard when it's nearly too late. If you've ever been dismissed, talked over, or made to doubt your gut, don't turn away from this story now. There's more to be revealed. Because if Seraphine was wrong, why did everything she predicted come true? The Aspen Children's Medical Pavilion gleamed with polished confidence. White walls, stainless counters, everything clean, controlled, clinical. Grant liked it here. He sat stiffly beside Elowen's stroller, nodding along as Dr. Pierce flipped through her charts, his words clipped and authoritative. "I understand your concern," the doctor said, tapping a page. "But what we're seeing is textbook psychosomatic food aversion, rare, but not unheard of in infants who've been around unstable emotional environments." Grant glanced away, jaw tightening. "You're suggesting this is psychological?" Dr. Pierce offered a reassuring smile. "Children absorb more than we realize. Her appetite loss is likely a response to maternal instability, not a physical illness." Behind them, Naya stood quietly, watching. Science spoke confidently, but Grace remained silent. Elowen shifted in her stroller, a weak whimper escaping her lips. Naya moved closer, holding out a pacifier, which the baby swatted away with a barely coordinated hand. Grant frowned. "She hasn't let anyone feed her in 2 days. "That supports my theory," Dr. Pierce replied. "She's rejecting nourishment as a form of emotional shutdown. With time and a stable environment, it will pass." But Naya wasn't convinced. Later that day, back in the nursery, she tried again. She warmed the bottle herself, tested it on her wrist, and sat Elowen upright in the crook of her arm. Gently, she brought the bottle to the baby's lips. Elowen recoiled violently, her cry sharp and sudden. Her fists clenched, mouth trembling, eyes wide with panic. It wasn't fussiness. It was pain. Naya paused, heart pounding, and wiped the baby's lips with a soft cloth. Something strange clung to the skin, a faint, filmy residue. She sniffed it. There was a bitter chemical smell, almost sour. Not formula, not medicine. Something else. She reached for another cloth and wiped again, more gently. The baby whimpered but didn't resist. Naya's stomach turned. Had this always been there? She turned to Grant, who stood by the door, half scrolling on his phone. "She's reacting to something on the bottle," Naya said carefully. "There's residue, a bitter film. I don't think it's psychosomatic." Grant looked up slowly, then offered a polite smile. "I appreciate your concern, Nya, but Dr. Pierce has assured me this is temporary. Let's not add more stress, all right?" Stress? The baby was in pain, and everyone was brushing it off like a phase. Later that night, while Grant stepped into a late Zoom meeting and the house quieted, Naya returned to the crib with fresh gloves and a flashlight. Elowen was asleep, her breathing shallow. Naya knelt beside her and carefully, reverently, slipped a gloved finger into the baby's mouth. A soft whimper. Then silence. She swabbed the roof of the mouth, the tongue, the inner cheeks. When she pulled her finger back, there it was again, a slight shimmer. The same bitter scent. She whispered aloud, "What is this?" "What?" She dipped her finger into a clean tissue and held it under the light. Her eyes narrowed. Was it chemical, medicinal, soap, poison? What was burning the baby's tongue? Not all harm leaves bruises. Sometimes it leaves residue, silent pain, faint reactions. If you've ever known something was off, even when the experts dismissed you, this story is yours. Stay close. The nursery lights flickered. Elowen whimpered again, softly this time. Naya didn't sleep that night. She was already planning her next move. The light in the nursery had shifted. Late afternoon sun poured in like spilled gold across the soft carpet, casting long shadows beneath the crib. Dust danced in the air, catching on every breath. The toys on the shelves watched in silence, frozen witnesses. Nya stood by the crib, leaning gently on the rail, her gloved hands still dusted with the scent of formula and sterilizing wipes. It had become her habit now, gloves on at all times, never trusting what might linger on the surfaces around Elowen. The child stirred beneath the blanket, her movements small and fragile then. Something new. Elowen pushed up on trembling arms, her bones stark beneath her skin. She staggered upright, for the first time in days, legs like reeds bending under weight too great for them. She gripped the bars of the crib, head wobbling as though even the air was too heavy. Naya's breath caught. She reached out instinctively, one hand hovering in the space between them. Shock, awe, and fear. Sometimes the truth waits for the right pair of eyes, because in that moment, Naya understood. Elowen was not afraid of hunger. She was afraid of the bottle. Naya looked at the one still sitting on the side table. Sealed. Warm. Innocent. The baby turned her face from it, mouth twisting, body tensing. It wasn't the hunger that made her cry. It was the thing meant to end it, and somewhere deep inside, Naya's fear crystallized into something sharper. Certain, she looked at her own hand still hovering above the crib rail, gloved and frozen in the very pose she'd seen in the reflection of her dream the night before. Was this what she'd missed before? The trembling line between care and danger? The sound of keys in the front door broke the stillness. Grant entered moments later, face tight, eyes tired. He gave a faint nod toward the monitor and the laptop on the counter. CCTV backups finally finished uploading, he said, more to the room than to Naya. Took forever. The system's buggy. Naya didn't reply. She just watched him as he clicked through the files, fast-forwarding through endless footage of quiet rooms and empty halls, until his hand stopped on the trackpad. Huh. What is it? Nya asked quietly. He squinted. There's a 2-hour window missing here. From yesterday. Between 3:12 and 5:07 p.m. The upload just skipped it. Naya moved closer. That was during Elowen's nap. Naya had stepped out then, briefly, to wash the linens downstairs. She'd heard nothing unusual. No alerts, no sounds, just silence. Her stomach turned. CCTV didn't glitch like this. Not in this house. Grant paid for military-grade surveillance. 2 hours missing, not an accident. There are moments when silence becomes a decision, if your heart still chooses to see. Staying with stories like this is how we refuse to look away. Elowen whimpered softly in her crib. Naya knelt beside her, brushing a gloved hand along her fragile arm. The child flinched not from touch, but from the bottle still sitting nearby, untouched. The silence in the room pressed in, too loud now to ignore. Naya looked at Grant. Who else has access to the system? He didn't answer. She stared at the blinking gap on the screen. What happened in those missing 2 hours? The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of electronics behind the locked door of Grant's private security room. It was long past midnight. The walls of screens glowed in rows of grayscale hallway feeds, door sensors, timestamps blinking like restless eyes. Grant sat alone, back tense, a tumbler of untouched whiskey at his side. He didn't know what he was hoping to find, only that something was wrong and had been for a while. He clicked into the nursery cam archive. There she was, Elowen. Timestamp, 11:42 a.m. Tuesday. The footage showed her crying, arms flailing weakly, legs stiff. A nurse leaned over the crib, cooing gently, but Elowen's cry intensified as the bottle neared her lips. Another timestamp, Wednesday, 10:05 a.m. Same nurse. Same bottle, same cry but louder. Desperate, as if she knew what was coming. Grant leaned forward. Then another clip, Friday, 2:14 p.m. Different nurse. A soft lullaby played from a speaker. Elowen barely whimpered as the bottle came toward her. Her body stayed limp, eyes glassy. She had stopped fighting. The screen flickered to the next file. This time, Grant slowed the playback. The nurse, the first one, entered the nursery with a bottle already in hand. But between the hallway and the crib, she paused off camera, near the changing table. Just for a moment. When she reappeared, she held a different bottle. The switch had happened out of sight. He scrubbed back, watched again. Same movement, same pause, same swap, twice, 3 times, but always just out of view. The truth does not announce itself, it waits to be found. Grant sat back, rubbing his eyes. Then something else. something he hadn't expected. He rewound to Wednesday. Timestamp, 5:04 p.m. The monitor feed jumped, skipping forward 2 hours. But just before the gap, just before the missing footage began, Naya appeared. She entered the frame in a blur, fast, breathless, and ran into the nursery. No gloves, no tray, just her. Then the feed cut to black. Time jump. When the footage resumed, the room was quiet again. The baby asleep. The bottle gone. Grant paused the screen. Why had Naya rushed in? What had she seen? She hadn't mentioned this to him. Not once. He opened another feed. The hallway cam outside the nursery. Same timestamp, 4:59 p.m. Naya walked calmly into the laundry room. 4 hours, 59 minutes, and 42 seconds. She came out running. Grant leaned in, replaying the movement again and again. Something had sent her flying down the hall. But the camera angle didn't reveal the source. It revealed only urgency. He glanced toward the door. Naya was upstairs, asleep or pretending to be. The baby monitor was quiet. But here, in the surveillance room, truths whispered through silence. The baby cried when certain people fed her. The bottles were being switched, but never on camera. And Naya, the only one who had consistently raised questions, was always missing when the worst happened. Until that one moment. There were only 2 possibilities. Either she was exactly what she seemed, or she wasn't. There's a reason stories like this don't make the news. Not because they aren't real, but because the moment we look too closely, we can't unknow what we've seen. If you've made it this far, maybe the story found you for a reason. Grant clicked through another frame. Eyes narrowed. Why did Naya run? The nursery was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the moon pushing through sheer curtains. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, but inside, everything stood still, suspended. It felt as though heaven held its breath. Naya leaned forward, both gloved hands resting gently on the crib rail. Her body was quiet, but inside, her pulse thudded like a drum. Elowen was standing. For the second time in as many days, the child had defied every medical prediction. She clutched the rail with bony fingers, legs trembling beneath her nightgown, face drawn but alert, her tiny eyes locked onto Nia's wide, dark knowing. Across the floor, toys and teddy bears lay scattered, some upright, some toppled as if they'd been pushed or fallen in some invisible scuffle. A small pink wheelchair brought in after a failed mobility consult sat abandoned in the corner, ghost-like in the shadows, and in the doorway, Grant stood frozen. He hadn't announced himself. He hadn't moved. He simply stood there, eyes fixed on the scene before him as if he'd stumbled into a dream he wasn't supposed to see. Naya didn't turn. She spoke softly, still facing Elowen. "You're scared of the bottle, aren't you?" The child didn't speak, couldn't, but her shoulders tightened. Her grip on the rail stiffened. It was all the answer Naya needed. She reached down, picked up the bottle that had been left on the warmer just moments before. It looked harmless in the half-light, normal, familiar, but nothing about this house had felt normal in weeks. Grant stepped forward finally, his voice low. "What are you doing?" Nya didn't answer right away. Instead, she tilted the bottle slowly, watching the liquid inside shift. That's when she saw it. It didn't move like formula. It separated. Half the liquid clung to the side of the glass. The rest turned thin and milky at the bottom. As she swirled it gently, 2 distinct layers remained visible, refusing to mix. Grant took another step forward, his brow furrowed. "What is that?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Naya turned her head just slightly toward him, but her eyes remained on the bottle. "I don't know," she whispered. Then she held it up to the moonlight, tilting it again. The separation deepened, one part creamy, the other translucent, viscous. The air in the nursery thickened, as if every object in the room recognized what they were seeing and recoiled. Elowen whimpered behind her, eyes darting between the bottle and Naya's face. Grant moved closer now, slower, as though afraid of what the next few seconds might reveal. What had they been feeding her? Naya whispered. The room didn't answer. Neither did the bottle. But something ancient and cold moved in the stillness. Something that had waited too long to be noticed. If you've ever felt something was wrong before you could prove it, If you've ever sensed that the things we trust might be hurting the ones we love, this story is yours to finish. Don't look away now, because next comes the truth, and it doesn't mix well with silence. The lab smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. Cold fluorescence buzzed overhead as a technician in a white coat slid a final report across the steel counter toward Grant Wilder. The file was thick, pages stacked with chemical analysis, timestamps, and reference markers. But it was the first page that made the room spin. Toxic compounds identified. Not one, not two, three. Foreign substances, acidic preservatives not listed on any packaging, and a binding agent used in outdated sedatives. Not lethal in isolation, but mixed with formula over time, destructive, starving, deliberate. This wasn't chance, the technician said softly. Someone added these. Consistently, Grant said nothing. He only stared. The air around him changed, slowed, as though the walls of the toxicology lab had become a confessional. His fingers gripped the countertop. Seraphine hadn't been delusional. She'd been early, and no one had listened. It didn't take long. Under pressure and with footage re-examined, the nurse broke. First a denial, then stammered excuses. Then the truth. She'd altered the formula, not out of hate but obedience. A quiet directive passed down through a chain of whispers. A new blend, they were told. A pilot study. Safer for sensitive babies. Only later did she notice the changes in Elowen's skin, her cry, her refusal. By then, it was too late. The instructions were to continue until told otherwise. And she had. It was the kind of truth that made people look away. But not Nia. Back in the Wilder home, the nursery was quiet. For the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like grief. Nia sat beside the crib, one hand resting gently on the railing. Elowen lay in her arms, wrapped in a cotton blanket, her head nestled into the crook of Nia's elbow. A clean bottle sat between them, freshly opened, prepared under hospital supervision. Nia tilted it forward, heart in her throat. Elowen blinked, lips parting. She didn't cry. She didn't recoil. She drank, a slow, soft rhythm tentative. Then sure. A swallow. Another. Her fingers uncurled, resting lightly against Nia's wrist. It was a miracle in motion. No cliffhanger, no suspicion, just the quiet sound of healing beginning. Across town, Grant parked in the hospital garage and didn't move. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles paled. The report sat on the passenger seat, its pages too heavy for paper. He saw Seraphine's face in his memory, wild, pleading, dismissed. He saw Elowen's ribs beneath her skin. He saw the bottle, the layers that wouldn't mix. And then he saw himself, the man who had believed the charts, the system, the science, the one who'd chosen comfort over confrontation. And it broke him. Alone in the car, in the stillness of his realization, Grant fell to his knees, on the cold concrete, between oil stains and shadows, not because he was weak, but because mercy had arrived, and it came too late for his certainty to matter. This wasn't chance. It was mercy arriving late. And if you've ever prayed for a miracle after the damage was done, this story knows how you feel. Tonight, a child was fed the truth, and for the first time in weeks, she slept. The gates at Silver Pines opened without ceremony. No apology, no press, no doctors lining the hallway to admit their mistake. Just the slow sound of release metal groaning against cold mountain air, as Seraphine Wilder stepped out carrying nothing but a folded coat and the weight of having been right. A car waited at the bottom of the hill. Grant wasn't inside. Back at the Wilder residence, the nursery had changed. The crib now sat beside a window that stayed open, even in winter. Blankets were warmer. Light was softer, and the child who once couldn't lift her head had begun to stand again. Unaided, slowly, uncertainly, but with growing strength. Elowen was healing, but not untouched. Her laugh came less freely now. She blinked longer before trusting a hand, and she still turned her head when a bottle came near, even though the danger had passed. Not all healing is loud. Some arrives with lifelong consequence. Grant stood at the far end of the hallway, watching. The doctors had cleared Seraphine. No lasting psychosis. No instability. just exhaustion layered on disbelief. Covered by months of being silenced, she didn't look at him as she entered the nursery again for the first time. She didn't need to. Some things can't be repaired, only carried. Naya left a week later. No warning, no fanfare, just a short note left on the entry table. No bank details for the bonus Grant had tried to arrange. No forwarding address. She refused reward because she hadn't stayed for money. She'd stayed because someone needed to stay. And now that the child was safe, she disappeared like someone who understood the sacredness of silence after a storm. From the balcony, Grant watched them. His wife in the nursery, whispering lullabies again. His daughter reaching, finally, for light. A bottle untouched, resting by the window. He no longer entered the room. Not yet. Instead, he watched, humbled, haunted, changed. Because some men don't need to fall apart loudly to realize they've broken something that can't be rebuilt. And no lab report, no confession, no cleared name would give him back what he allowed to be taken. At Silver Pines, the records were quietly updated. At the hospital, a protocol was reviewed, then quietly ignored. And in homes like theirs, across towns like Aspen, stories like this would be reduced to whispers. But this one had been seen, heard, survived. Some stories don't end with celebration, they end with truth. Staying with stories like this is not about entertainment. It's about remembrance, because silence can be deadly. But witnessing, that's how we protect the ones who can't speak. As night settled in, the nursery glowed in golden lamplight. Elowen slept, Seraphine sang, and Grant stood in the hallway like a man who would carry his consequence quietly, forever. Because in the end, God did not return what was lost, but he revealed what had been hidden.